The year-long review of the nation's $1.3 trillion superannuation industry is now over, leaving a big body of research and 177 recommendations which, if followed, would produce a revolution in the way retirement incomes are managed. Among the key ideas is the establishment of a low-cost My Super default fund, which would hold the savings of almost 80% of workers. It also calls for tougher prudential and regulatory standards in a move away from the current more laissez-faire approach. To drill into this fundamental shift in thinking on super, I spoke to the review's chairman and chief author, Jeremy Cooper. Well, Jeremy Cooper, it seems like the central kind of philosophy around your report is a rejection of the Wallace Report of 1997, which really brought to the whole thing the idea that super investors are rational individuals who should be allowed to get on with it, and the market should decide how it goes. Is that a fair characterisation of how you've approached it?
Well, I'm not sure about rejecting. We're just taking a different view. We're saying that really superannuation isn't a normal financial product because while some people choose to be in it, others don't. It's compulsory. So if you have a job, you have to have super, and therefore the product itself has to cater for a very wide range of different human beings, not necessarily just investors.
But I can't resist personalising it a little. I mean, you're a lawyer and a regulator, and Stan Wallace was a businessman, ran Amcor and so on, so he's likely to be much more inclined towards a market-based solution, whereas perhaps you would be more inclined towards a regulated solution.
Well, that's possibly right, but I think globally we've seen a bit of a shift, and possibly the GFC helped us with this, a bit of a shift away from the sort of economic rationalism, efficient market hypothesis and so on, more to this way of thinking, which is characterised by the book Nudge, where it basically accepts that human beings are not so-called econs, that they're human, and certainly when they make investment decisions, they don't always act in a rational way.
In fact, you call it libertarian paternalism in your report. And I must say, reading the report, it seems to lean towards the paternalism rather than the libertarian.
Possibly, but yeah, go back to the original idea. It's very paternalistic. Compulsory superannuation, which really only exists in a very few countries, is very paternalistic. It's saying, well, unless we force the population to put money away for retirement, they're not going to do it. So we're going to work out what we think their best interest is, and we're going to force them to hold back wages that would otherwise be spent on school shoes and petrol and all those sort of important things. That money is held back by the government. That's very paternalistic. So to criticise these ideas because they're paternalistic sort of forgets what the system, what super actually is.
So you've come up with the central solution of what you call My Super, the sort of the standard default fund, and it seems to be a straitjacket for default funds. I suppose the question that comes to mind is why, in fact, go halfway? You sort of got this standard straitjacket for market-based default funds. Wouldn't it have been just a natural step to create one national default fund?
20 years too late, Alan. It'd be pretty bad public policy to let the sort of funds management industry that we've got in Australia, to let that and the proliferation of super funds, to let that go, and then kind of 18 odd years later say, oh, well, actually, we're going to do a U-turn now, and we'll just have one national default fund.
Would you? I mean, if it wasn't 20 years too late, would you think that would be the way to go, hypothetically?
It probably ought to form some part of the overall package. Often you find that governments intervene where things are uneconomical, in utilities and in industries where there are either not the profit margins or it just is appropriate for government to be there. So
no, I mean, do you think that 20 years ago the government should have set up a national default fund?
I was certainly not. Well, would we have so vibrant a system as we do now?
Yeah, but do you think it's too expensive?
Look, yes, it is, and we're working on that, but we're still essentially the whole report assumes a market-based solution. We've got a market-based system. That's not going to change. I think it's too late to talk about the government intervening to that extent. We are recommending government intervention, but it's to mandate effectively an efficiency equation, basically saying, look, this is a compulsory system. People are forced to be in it. Therefore, it has to be pretty accountable. And we're giving new we're suggesting anyway, new powers and new mandate for APRA to really hunt down that efficiency.
I mean, in fact, the efficiency to some extent comes about through scale. As you make clear, you asked Deloitte to look at the various fees that would result from the prescription you've put down for MySuper. And it's quite clear that the bigger the fund, the lower the fees. So why not actually mandate a certain size of fund, that the default fund needs to be at least a certain size?
We've done that in a soft way. It's very hard to draw lines and say, well, it's precisely this figure. But to become a MySuper fund, you have to have a certain amount of scale. We don't know what that precisely is yet, and of course it'll change from year to year as the system grows. A $30 billion fund sounds big now, but it certainly won't be in 5 or 10 years' time. It won't be.
But in your examples, you've got the fund size from $2 billion to $20 billion.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the costs, you talk about the $20 billion fund costs, which are obviously much lower. They range from 0.3% to 0.66%. I mean, $2 billion funds are clearly too small, aren't they?
Clearly too small. Yeah, and really, even $20 billion is modest in a $1.3 trillion system. That's a lot of zeros, and even a $20 billion fund, certainly globally, is really just not a player.
Some of the criticisms of your report are focused around the extra reporting requirements and the extra regulation actually leading to more costs, not less. I mean, what's your answer to that?
Look, that's partly true. There will be any change involves some implementation cost, but I really don't think they're as dramatic as people are saying. And certainly our superstream proposals, our back office changes, they will certainly have some cost initially, and whether that could be tens of millions, it could be 50 million. But we've been told that it's going to save $1 billion a year. So you need to keep that in perspective. The industry is basically saying, look, it costs around about $3.5 billion to do the whole administration. The superstream component is about 1/3 to 1/4 of that, so you get somewhere around $1 billion. If that could be taken totally electronic, no human intervention, you'd save around about $1 billion a year.
Are you pretty confident that that $1 billion won't end up in the pockets of the funds?
Some of it will have to end up with intermediaries, with the administrators who have actually been forced to sort of do their work at an unacceptably low profit margin. So some of it will leak, but the large proportion of it will go to members.
And one of the sections of your report talks about outstanding issues, which you've left open. What do you think the number one outstanding issue is now?
Oh, it's probably the retirement product market. Just what are the products that need to be there to cope with the longevity risk, the inflation risk?
After people have retired, you
mean? That's an area that needs a lot more work, and I think that's generally accepted to be the case.
Do you think the government should have a role in that, providing a post-retirement product in some way that accounts for the risk of somebody living far longer than they expected?
Henry dealt with some aspects of post-retirement to which the government hasn't fully responded. Most governments in Western economies really want to stay out of the retirement risk market. In this country, the age pension actually...
That's what it is, of course.
People, yeah.
And they're trying to get away from that.
Well, there's not a lot of evidence of that at the moment, but for most people, the age pension... which does do the job of coping with that risk.
Thanks for joining us, Jeremy Cooper.
Thanks, Alan.